it was almost like I was well one day, and then the next day my cup was overflowing with I was like laying on the ground depressed.
Wow.
So it was very overwhelming, a very physical and emotional experience. And I, of course, am somebody that wants to know the why. And so I didn't take it lying down. So I started to see different doctors, homeopaths, practitioners, trying to understand what was going on.
So let's start with your health journey, which was inspired and inspired Love Wellness. And so what was your experience that sparked the idea of Love Wellness? Get me inside of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think even to go a step further back, I've always been into science. I want to know the why about everything. I'm a very curious person and sort of a forever student. And so in 2014, 2015, I started to not feel like myself. I was depressed. I was anxious. I kept getting recurrent UTIs and vaginal infections for the first time in my life. And it was almost like I was well one day, and then the next day my cup was overflowing with I was like laying on the ground depressed.
Wow.
So it was very overwhelming, a very physical and emotional experience. And I, of course, am somebody that wants to know the why. And so I didn't take it lying down. So I started to see different doctors, homeopaths, practitioners, trying to understand what was going on. And the feedback that I got for, the first year plus was you're just stressed. Obviously, you're going through a challenging time in your relationship and trying to figure out what you want to do in your career. You're just stressed, right? And that was a pretty disappointing response I felt. And I think it's very reflective of a lot of experiences of women when you try to self-advocate for yourself in the medical world. You go in with something wrong and, you just get told it's all in your head, right? And I knew deep down, I had this gut feeling that there was a physical element to what I was dealing with. And it took 18 months, but then finally my general practitioner said, let's run a vitamin panel. Which is so basic. And 18 months after my symptoms first started, my test came back and showed that I had severe vitamin deficiencies that were definitely responsible for at least some of the neurological and physical symptoms that I was experiencing. And so it felt like a relief because I finally had a little bit of an answer, right? The light bulb went on a little bit. And then I started to learn that I most likely had a gut health issue that was actually causing all of my problems. When you have gut dysbiosis, which means your gut microbiome is not doing well, you may have leaky gut. One of the results of that is a really hard time absorbing nutrients from food. It can leak upstairs and create depression and anxiety issues. And the gut and the vagina are also connected, the third organ on that axis. Your gut microbiome actually communicates with your vaginal microbiome. And if your gut microbiome's in bad shape, it's like they tell the bacteria in the vaginal microbiome, which protect you, to also not be doing very well. So once I had this information and knowledge, I started to look for products that could help resolve what I was dealing with. And nothing like this existed in 2014.
So let me ask you this question just to clarify. What were you solving for? I mean, there was some depression, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. So some depression, anxiety. I also was dealing with, like I said, UTIs and vaginal health issues. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, what I learned through this experience is that gut health is really responsible for a lot of neurological problems and a lot of vaginal and urinary tract health issues because the organs are connected. And so at the time, you could not go out and find women's probiotics. You could not find probiotics that supported vaginal health, right? That was a completely new concept back in 2016. Making a probiotic with strains of bacteria that occur organically in the vaginal microbiome. Boric acid suppositories were not available on the market. And I had an amazing OBGYN that said, you know what, you keep getting these recurrent infections. The stuff at the drugstore and the prescriptions I keep writing aren't working. So let's try a very old school but natural method. Let's try boric acid suppositories. but you have to take this prescription to the compounding pharmacy and get it made, and it's going to be a couple $100 and it's going to take a few days. However, it really, really worked for me.
Oh, okay.
And I just started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and I realized, nobody is approaching women's health in a way that addresses root causes, which when it comes to our bodies, it's typically occurring as a result of what we're eating, right? Like lifestyle, things that can disrupt your gut, in turn disrupt the vagina and the brain. And then it's also a combination of the products that we're using, right? In the personal care industry, historically, all of the products made by legacy brands have crazy chemicals in them that we don't believe belong in women's health products. Things like fragrance, surfactants, parabens. All of those ingredients have the potential to disrupt the microbiome, be endocrine disruptors, and ultimately be one of the causes of like recurrent infections. But we've been told, hey, this stuff is safe and you should use it forever. When in actuality, it's not. It's just a marketing machine from some companies, convincing you that you need a fragranced vulva cleanser so that, you're appealing to your partner or whatever, right? And so it's like things that we're putting on our body, things that we're putting in our body, creating this really challenging situation for women's bodies. And there was no brand that was addressing women's health from both the inside and the outside.
And so what's interesting to me a little bit is you're not feeling well. You're navigating all these challenges. Most people don't start a company when they're navigating all these issues, which are pretty real. Get me inside of that.
So at the time, I had been off of television for a number of years. I think The Hills ended in 2010, if memory serves correct. And I was living in New York. It was my first few years, and I was really focused on content creation. Being a creator back in those days, it was very much the wild, wild west, but YouTube was big, and running paid content on your Instagram was big. And so I was really focused on food and nutrition because it's also a passion of mine. I went to culinary school, the French Culinary Institute, when I first moved to New York, because I thought, well, maybe I can have a career in the food world, cooking and sharing this passion. And ultimately at that time, we were in talks with some of the food networks on TV, Food Cooking Channel, talking about doing a show with them. And then they abruptly changed their mind after, a year and a half. And so I was kind of left holding the bag without the opportunity that I thought was coming down the pipeline from a career perspective. And instead, I was just finding myself in a bad relationship and very sick and depressed. And so ultimately, I think my experience is common of other founders. When you find yourself down in the dumps, in the trenches, you solve your problems. And typically those problems through an entrepreneurial lens, can be commodified and turned into a business if it really helps you, if it really changes your life. And so, these things were really helping me from a health perspective. I've always been interested in consumer brands. I've always thought when I was younger, maybe I'll have a nail polish company or a makeup company or whatever. I've always been really fascinated by beauty and wellness. And so this opportunity, it really just sort of came to me in a time of need. And because the opportunity with the food entertainment career sort of that door was closed. And so I had to figure it out. I had to figure out, what am I going to do next?
Sure.
And I decided to put my whole heart and soul into it
and launch Love Wellness.
I'm so happy I did. Oh my gosh.
And so tell me, okay, so just to rewind the tape, you're struggling physically, you're navigating, you're seeing gaps in the market, you're wanting to solve for those, you're passionate about it, the door closes. Where'd you start with Love Wellness? Get me inside of that from a business perspective. Where did you start to where it is now, which is unbelievable, right? Yeah. So rewind that tape for me a bit.
It's an interesting story. So I started the company by myself in my living room in Tribeca and operated it for the first 2 years totally by myself. self-funded it with the little bit of money that I had left in my savings from my television career.
Sure.
And the overhead wasn't too significant. It was mostly the initial inventory that we needed. But I was able to identify, with the help of medical experts, the 5 products that we wanted to develop and bring to market as kind of the initial Love Wellness offering. And it was our women's probiotic for vaginal health, a daily vitamin for vaginal health. It's called Healthy V Vitamin, that helps break down candida yeast like throughout the entire body. Wow. It was our pH balancing cleanser, which is one of the best selling women's personal hygiene cleansers in America now. Wipes, and then the killer, which is our boric acid suppository. Again, one of the best selling vaginal suppositories in the United States at this point. And those products were reflective of things that I was introduced to, over the previous year, that finally moved the needle for me from a women's health perspective, and actually resolved the recurrent issues that I was dealing with. But again, there was no company that was like making these in, FDA approved safe facilities that were doctor developed, that were working with good manufacturers, that were tying them together with a brand, right? You could go get, a women's probiotic, in the fridge at like maybe your local health food store, right? But there was no company that was saying, hey, this is our offering that all works together, that is a simple solution that you need for women's health problems. And at the time, I was really inspired by Glossier and Casper, right? Back then, it was like the moment for brands with a capital B in the consumer space. It was a really interesting time. And I thought, I have this platform. I have an audience on Instagram. I've always been outspoken and somebody that people go to for advice. I had an advice podcast at the time that was really popular. And also I'm a woman. I have a vagina, right? So like, why?
Hey, let's keep it real. Let's go. Right.
Why am I not qualified to own and operate this business, of course, with the assistance of, medical professionals, and talk about my experience, right? So it was a brand that was founded in my authentic story, and it was a story that I was willing to share with my audience. Yeah. And so when I started the company, I think we launched October 13th, 2016. A very interesting time to start a women's health business. I just started by talking about it on my social media channels. And for the first 2 years, we didn't pay to acquire any customers. It just was, direct one-to-one, me to my audience. But the products worked so well, the innovation was so innovative.
Right.
That word started to spread. And it was a really grassroots effort the first couple of years. But I worked with the manufacturers directly, worked with our, medical advisors directly. I built our first Shopify website. I figured out all of the 3PL stuff. And eventually after 2 years, and listen, this is my first time operating any kind of consumer business. After 2 years, I think we were doing, maybe $7,500 a day on our D2C website. And I told a couple friends, and they were like, what? You have a real business. Like, you really need to be focused on this. And that was sort of the wake up moment for me. And that's when I started to think I could really do this full time. Maybe I could bring in partners, hire a couple people. And so about 2 years in is when I started to look for some help, because I really needed it. And so brought in a CMO, somebody who was like, digital expert, brought in our VP of customer service, VP of sales and logistics, and we just started to build the team piece by piece. We raised
for 2 years, it was just you?
Yeah.
and I can't even imagine, creating a product like these in a world that would scrutinize the heck out of what's in it, is it safe, all of these things. how did you do that? I mean, from prototype to delivery, who did you lean into, docs, et cetera, but how did you do that? And then funding that, obviously for 2 years, that's no joke.
Yeah, so, I think that I have always been incredibly interested in clean, effective, whether it's, wellness, nutrition, food. And so I think that there's a contingent of people who are really into that stuff and who have just general, like wider general knowledge than other people because we do a lot of research, right? We're sort of
Sure.
self-taught. You go
Sure.
out and you read studies and you become a
Yep.
student of these things and you become an
Yep.
expert in your own right. Um, our medical advisors really provided us with a lot of help in the beginning from an ingredient perspective, and helping us choose clinically studied ingredients that had information behind them that you could go out and be like, okay, like this ingredient is proven to do XYZ. And then the next layer of that is working with really high quality contract manufacturers that are FDA approved,
Got it.
that manage all of the health and safety information of these products. You get your products third party tested very consistently so that you know that what you say is in the product is actually in the product.
Sure.
And then you release it into the wild, right? And
Yep.
generally speaking, the products that we make don't really have ingredients in them that are particularly controversial, right? We would never
Right.
put an ingredient into something that's like has
Sure.
exclamation points all around it.
Sure. Sure.
The ingredients are simple ingredients, right? It's like organic ginger and different strains of
Sure.
probiotics, things like
Right.
that.
Right. Right.
And so, over time, you get consumer information and feedback, and you adjust accordingly. I think, one of the really interesting things is when we first launched our cleanser, our pH balancing cleanser had a vanilla fragrance in it. And then within the first year, we learned that fragrance is something that absolutely should not be included in a personal care cleanser because
Got it.
the fragrance can harm the vaginal microbiome. And so we, over time, eliminated that ingredient and
Wow.
have
Yep.
continued to make adjustments
Sure.
as more research comes out about certain ingredients and how they can be helpful or hurtful to the body. So I think as a brand, we're always open to innovating ourselves, innovating our own products and solutions so
Yep.
that they are, the best quality and standard they can be.
Sure, absolutely, which is fantastic, obviously, right? To your point, I mean, the world's moving quick, research is coming in, and to be
Totally.
comfortable calling audibles as you go. I mean, I love what you said about curiosity. To me, one of the things I hear consistently on my podcast with conversations with incredible people like you is curiosity. I mean, they're constantly trying to discover gaps in the world, in themselves, in their products, etc. So I would imagine there were some misconceptions that you had to overcome in your entrepreneurial journey, right? As you stepped into launching Love Wellness, the products that roll up inside of the business. What were some of those, and how did you navigate that?
I mean, I think probably the biggest barrier to entry for me was my previous job reputation as a reality personality or whatever, girl on a reality show. And I think that people who participate in reality shows just out of the gate get a bad rap. We're not as respected as actors and actresses. But what's really interesting is that I would say that a lot of people who are on reality or are content creators or influencers actually are way better suited to be brand builders because we have the opportunity to have a really authentic connection with our customer. I mean, still to this day, right? Like very few people know that I started the company and operated it by myself for the first 2 years.
Right,
So I think
sure.
there's a tendency to think that if somebody is a creator, an influencer, they're just being hired by somebody to stand in front of a brand and they're paid to do that. But in my case, that's not the
Totally
case.
different. Sure. Yeah.
But however, you can either let those things bother you and you can get tied up in them and they can misdirect you, or you can just decide not to care and to
Yeah.
keep moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that was, something that definitely I had to overcome. But I think now, 7, 8 years later, I've learned that if you tell your story for long enough, consistently enough, eventually opinions of you change, right? And I think
Yeah.
generally
Yeah. Yeah.
speaking, people know that it's my business and that I've operated it. I think the other thing that is challenging about a women's personal care brand is the stigma, right? Around like the subject matter, right? We're talking about vaginal health. I'm talking about vulvas with my team in the office every single day. And it's still subject matter that is taboo to a lot of people. And that's why they aren't educated about it. And so I really had to make peace with myself that I was going to be talking about things that did originally embarrass me, but that it was my responsibility to have these conversations as the founder and CEO.
Sure.
Well, I just brought in a career CEO, so I'm not the CEO anymore, but as the founder of the company, I had to like make this okay in my own
Right.
body and be like, hey, mom and dad, I have a vaginal health company. And also be comfortable being the butt of a lot of jokes, right?
Right.
I'm sure the chatter, amongst my cohort was like, she started a vaginal health company. Like, she's crazy. But this like
But you can't listen. I mean, you don't listen. I mean, and I agree
listen.
with you. You got to control what you can control and let go of,
Totally.
and, yeah, let go of what you can. I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, that was probably, but you know what? Coming from the reality world where, I'm sure you got to a place where you just didn't read the comments about you, and you probably don't anymore either. And when I was a sports agent, I mean, I used to tell my guys, don't read it. It won't help you. It won't serve you. It'll tear you down, right?
Yeah,
So
when my friends Lauren Conrad and myself were on the hills, we always had this saying we said to each other, it was don't read the comments.
yeah,
Don't read the
yes,
comments.
100%. Absolutely. They're not going to help you. They're not going to help you. So, I mean, speaking of TV and what was it, 16 to 24 years old or something, you're sort of growing up in the front of the world at some level. How did that shape you? How did that shape you, good or bad, in your mind?
I think just the things that I was just talking about, right? Having a thick skin, allowing things to kind of just roll off your back. I developed and learned that skill set by being on television. Because it's a skill set that nobody is really born with. Things have to happen to you or at you for you to become really tough in that way. And so being in the public eye as a kid, when social media was starting and gossip blogs were starting, it definitely gave me that superpower that I continue to improve upon to this day, right? It's tough to really hurt my feelings. Obviously, I'm a human and you can hurt my feelings, but I've learned how to put certain things into a little box and accept them and understand them,
Sure.
right? And I think that is really like one of the big challenges, right? Is that like reality TV when I started, it was a social experiment. Nobody knew, and we're still learning about, how it affects people in the long term, right? And so it was challenging for me, and I was bullied a lot when I was in school, like after high school, when I was in college. I was bullied a lot and had to learn how to deal with that. But again, I think it's developed me into a person that can own and operate a business in the category that I'm in without it really
Sure.
getting to me. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I
So
bet. Oh, yeah, totally. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of
I
sense.
I think that's a superpower. But on the flip side of that, am I the most trusting person? No. Does it take a while for me
Right.
to allow somebody into my circle? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as my business gets more successful, I become even more wary of that, right?
Yeah.
It's like new
Sure.
people in my life. It's like, what are your intentions?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
genuinely want to be my friend, or do you want me to take you on a trip? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I used to tell my baseball players when they would be projected a first round pick, right? I'm like, dude, you think you're pretty good looking. And they're like, what is this lady asking me that question for? And they said, yeah, I mean, I guess so. I don't know. What do you mean? And I said, well, because you put a couple $1,000,000 in your back pocket at 18 and you're hot. I mean, you
Yeah.
are really hot, right?
Yeah.
So get ready.
The DMs will be coming.
Yeah, right. You get a lot of friends really fast, no question.
Right.
How much did you consciously want to take control of your narrative? Right, having been on a reality series for so long, I would imagine you want to take control of that at some level.
One of the primary reasons I moved to New York was because I needed to reclaim myself.
Okay.
And it was hard for me to do that in LA, where the Hills was located, right? I think a lot of people sort of like leave traumatic situations and events. For me, I was like, I'm leaving Los Angeles. So I moved to New York in 2012, and I've been there for 12 years now. And I think one of the things that drives me the most is trying to reclaim my narrative, whether that's good or bad or selfish or ego driven, whatever it is. I want to be known for what I'm doing now and for making a positive change in women's lives.
Yep. How hard was that at some level to get clear on, this is a gap that I'm experiencing in my life. I want to solve for it. And here's a vehicle by which, and I mean, granted, you saw a problem in the market, you experienced your own problems, hence Love Wellness. How much consciousness, if you will, was around it for you? As you said, I don't want to be known as this. I want to be known as this. And I'm smart. And I can start a business. And I got this, right? How much of that was conscious, do you think, in your mind, Lo?
A lot of it.
Really?
I think I had very high awareness of that from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's because I think I was never that comfortable in the entertainment industry. Not because, you're in the public eye. I mean, that was part of it, right? But also because when you work with a network or an agency or whatever, like, you are not in control of your paycheck and you don't have a guaranteed income. And for me, that's always been sort of like a foundational fear of mine, right? Like, can I pay my rent? Can I buy groceries? Can I support myself financially? Right. And in the entertainment industry, there was never that consistency. And being paid to post stuff on Instagram, there was never that consistency. And so I knew years before I started Love Wellness that I needed to either get a full-time job with a company or create my own company that was successful so that I could support myself and be comfortable in that. I just knew I had the foresight early on to be like, being a Instagram personality or on a show is not sustainable for your entire life.
Right. Sure.
You have to have another chapter. You have to support yourself in some way, in a different way.
Sure.
And I think it's hard for people on reality to free themselves, right, from that sort of original narrative. And so how can you work with it to create the next chapter of your life?
Yeah, and really own who you want to be and stand for. I had Matthew McConaughey on, who was the rom-com guy. And then he went through a period of time where I don't want to be that guy. That's not what I want to be known for. And he, goofed around for a while before he started to get some looks and not be the rom-com guy. And so, but he took control of that, which is what you've done, which is awesome. So, Lo, I got to ask you this, right? Because I read after you quit the Hills, you actually worked at a sports talent agency for a year or so, and you hated it. So here's the thing. I got to ask you this question because I was a sports agent for almost 20 years. So I feel like I can ask this question. What was it about that experience and that space that you hated? Get me inside of that.
Yeah, it really tapped into my own insecurity, the one that I just spoke to, about having consistent jobs and income, because our clients would call my desk that we didn't have work for. And I had to be the bearer of good or bad news. And I just thought, oh my God, it is really hard for me to feel like I'm responsible for you in this way, in these ways that I cannot control. So I think it really, before I started, I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I don't want to be on the talent side, but entertainment is the industry that I know, so I can move to the other side. I can work at an agency and, help people with their careers. And it turns out I could not. I was terrible at it.
You didn't love it at all. And so, but hey, I think that actually ended up being quite a blessing for you, no question. So I think it's important for people to know, because some people, their impression of you, right, is the reality TV journey that you were on. But you founded this incredible company. But it took you a while to get there. And you talked about sort of the 2 years as you launched it and where you are now, which is just remarkable. What was that window of time like between sort of stepping away from the reality TV world and then to closing that gap where you started to see, I want to solve a problem in the world because of one that I'm navigating? Get me inside of that window of time a little bit.
I think my experience is very reflective of a lot of other people who are 25 to 30. Mm-hmm. You're in a window where maybe you know what you want to do, or you have an idea, or maybe you don't, right? And I think a lot of people between the ages of 25 and 30 are not just existing, they are working towards some goal or some idea that they have about themselves, right? But in reality, I think you're still very much a kid and a little bit all over the place. Mm-hmm. At least for me, I was simply existing. And before I started Love Wellness and like really got deep into it, I was operating as a creator because that felt better than being on reality TV, because at least I could create my own content and put my own story out into the world. Mm-hmm. But I still didn't know long term what that looked like. And I think that that's really reflective of a lot of young people when they first start to work, right? You don't know if what you're doing at 26 is going to be what you're doing forever, right? And you're kind of just existing. You know, you're kind of
learning.
You're reacting in a lot of ways versus being proactive. Mm-hmm. And so I think that my experience, even though, it was on the internet and content is consumed by a lot of people, I think it's a pretty typical experience of having some idea, but not totally knowing, and just kind of rolling with the punches, like to keep it moving.
Sure. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. We have 3 daughters, and I think we live in a world where a lot of young people feel like they're supposed to know what they want to do. And I couldn't agree with you more, Lo. I encourage my girls, just worry about what you love, what you don't love, what you're good at, what you're not good at. Keep trying, failing, learning, and sort of through through natural elimination at some level, you'll start to figure out what you're really gifted at and what you're here to do. And I wish more young women, particularly you and I are both super passionate about helping women, took a little pressure off themselves, and certainly young girls took a little pressure off themselves, knowing that you don't need to know, and it's okay if you don't. And so I love that. And I would imagine there were some failures along the way, right, Lo? Some things that worked and some things that didn't. Tell me about that.
Well, my job at the sports agency didn't work.
Yeah, you killed that, man. You love that.
Yeah. When I first moved to New York, I actually was the co-founder in another startup that failed miserably and actually taught me a lot of lessons that I took with me into Love Wellness. And it was a party in a box business. I can laugh about it now, but my co-founder and I were dead serious about it at the time. We were like, and this was before Target and Amazon and all these things had really cute party supplies. I thought, we love to throw parties. We are great hostesses. Let's create a party in a box experience that's affordable. And, we'll tell you how to do the food and get all the things set up. And my co-founder's dad his business was international sourcing. And so we thought we had this in to getting, affordable, well-designed products. And it was just so much harder than we thought. We were trying to ship people boxes that were enormous at, cost-effective ways. And my co-founder and I didn't get along, and we couldn't agree on things. And we raised a couple $100,000 from friends and family, and the business ended up going under. And it was so difficult for me to even face my friends and family that had given me money for a few years, because I was like, I'm just so sorry. We failed. And I didn't know how to operate this business in the way that I thought, right? It didn't turn out in the way that I hoped that it would.
Mm-hmm.
And having to own that is a very
Sure.
interesting and painful and humbling experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but ultimately, it taught me so many lessons and set me up for greater chance of success when I started Love Wellness.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so often we learn a little bit more from the moments that we fail, a lot more from
Completely.
the moments that we fail. And you had a blog, Lowdown, and a YouTube channel, all of these things. And the French Culinary Institute, I can, barely make a grilled cheese loaf, so I'm super impressed. I mean, I'm
Nice.
impressed. I love it. So, okay, back to Love Wellness. Your products, they're in Ultra, they're in Target. You just launched in Walmart. You brought in a new CEO, as you said. How have you handled the rapid growth of the company over the last several years, which it's just a hockey stick?
Yeah. So if we go back to like 2019, 2020, I raised my Series B private equity round, I think really at the right time, kind of right before the pandemic. And so financially, we were in a good position to be able to handle sort of that hockey stick type of growth,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because your marketing budgets increase, your inventory costs increase, your headcount costs increase, right? Your OpEx increases, right?
Yep,
And
yep.
you have to be able to reflect that. And so, I mean, the team has just grown so significantly. We were maybe 5 or 6 people, 5 to 8 people back in 2018, 2019, and now we're 45 people.
Wow.
Um, and Ulta was our first retail partnership in 2019. And I am such an Ulta fan. It is my
Mm-hmm,
favorite beauty retailer in the world because you can get everything at Ulta. You
mm-hmm.
can get affordable price points, you can get luxury items, you can get razors, you can get eyeshadow, you can get vaginal health products like Love Wellness. And because it was our first retail partnership, we really didn't know what was going to happen. It was a complete experiment, right? We were like doing well on our D2C site, we were doing
Mm-hmm.
well on Amazon. And I thought, okay, can like gut health and vaginal health products work in a beauty environment? And so it was
Mm-hmm.
a complete experiment out of the gate. And immediately we saw such incredible success. And our first major learning as a brand was women want these products and they're more inclined to discover them and buy them in non-traditional settings. So
Oh, interesting.
when you put them into a beauty setting versus the
Mm.
tampon aisle, they're much more inclined to stand there to pick up the product, to actually read the packaging versus the tampon aisle where you run in, you're embarrassed and you grab the thing and you run out. And so I think in that the tampon aisle, you're like, okay, I see the Tampax, I know that brand, I'm going to go run, right? You don't want to be caught dead in that aisle. So discovery is more challenging there. So the first major learning was, okay, we could do really well in retail in an atypical environment. And
How
so
did
then
you figure that out? I mean, that is awesome.
it was just, I mean, it was, we could easily see it in our sales data, you
So,
know.
but I mean, were products on the tampon aisle and then they were in the beauty aisle and you were seeing the movement, or like get me inside of
No.
how
So,
you in fact figured that out?
well, because Ulta was our first retail partner.
Okay.
So we launched in a beauty store before we were
Got it.
in mass.
Got it.
And so we had no idea how we would perform in the tampon aisle, right?
Right.
Just the
Okay.
first learning was, oh my gosh, people are buying this stuff at a rate that we never anticipated
Mm-hmm.
in this beauty setting. And
Mm-hmm.
so our next retail partner was Target, and we launched nationwide in the natural beauty aisle. So
Wow.
trying to replicate that same success,
Yep.
which we did at Target in the natural beauty aisle. And it's interesting because we are also sold in OTC or the tampon aisle at Target.
Mm.
And
You're
our
in both
velocity,
locations.
we're in both locations, and our velocity in natural beauty outperforms our velocity in the tampon aisle, which is
Wow.
really, really interesting.
Yes, it is.
So then we knew that that was a proof point, right? We were like, okay, this is this
Yeah.
is for
This is our aisle. This is our
yeah.
lane.
Yeah, and most recently with Walmart, We have launched into 1,600 doors with 6 products in the digestive health aisle. So like in the poop aisle, basically, which is a really interesting place to be, and really reflective of how innovative and forward-thinking Walmart leadership is, because they understand that the gut and vagina are connected on that axis, and that gut health influences vaginal health. So we're selling vaginal health products in the gut health, in the digestive health aisle at Walmart.
Interesting.
And we're already seeing our vaginal health products outperform our gut health products in that aisle. So it's really interesting.
It's very interesting. I mean, that is so interesting. And I'm wondering, I mean, getting a product on the shelf in a national brick and mortar retailer like you're talking about here is so hard. I mean, it is so hard. Sarah Blakely lives around the corner from us, and love her story, right around pounding on Nordstrom's door to try to get in there. How did you get that first bite? Because I imagine you did it, I would imagine. Get me inside of that a little bit, because that's no joke what you did. And now you've got the sales numbers to support getting into the other locations, right?
Sure. So this is where privilege really comes into play, because I was on TV, was able to earn an audience, grow my social media platforms. And so retailers initially came to us.
Wow.
Right? So that is an incredible privilege, right? To not have to do outreach to retailers.
No kidding. Sure.
And so that is something that I do not take for granted.
Sure.
And it's worth all of the negative stuff
yeah.
I had to deal with, right?
Yeah.
But I think that is a very typical experience in retail now, is that they're looking for founder-led brands that have a built-in audience, because it helps to support sell-through of products on shelf. So it's really a business strategy from the retailers to connect with people that have existing audiences, because it gets people into those retail doors for very little to no cost. And ultimately that supports the retailer at large.
That's good stuff. That's cool. So what's next for Love Wellness?
Well, we would really like to do well at Walmart. We continue to develop our team. I mentioned I stepped aside as CEO in March and brought in Maria Dempsey, who was the CEO of Nest Fragrances. She's a career CEO, because frankly, I had reached my ceiling in terms of my ability and knowledge and know-how. I don't know how to manage 45 people and do all of those one-on-ones and look at the financial model and understand, okay, we want our EBITDA to be this and we need to grow at this rate over these next couple years, right? I have become a student of my new CEO again, versus being the one who's making all the decisions. I grew the business to a very respectable size and managed that. And now it's time for somebody who has really done this before and has the playbook to continue to execute, because I think where a lot of people end up struggling is that 50 million net revenue sort of area, and then they think that they can continue on in the leadership position, but they just haven't done it before. They don't have the know-how. And if you want to scale your company to $100 million, you have to bring in experts who have done it before. I firmly believe that. And so I thought, I have to get out of my own way. I want this business to be incredibly successful and to kick ass and to achieve the mission of the business, right? Which is to change this category and help educate women on how to take better care of their bodies. And I need help to do that. I need help.
What a tribute to you, Lo, for seeing that, for recognizing. Was your top line revenue at about, or your net revenue at 50 million-ish when you said, hey, I need to bring somebody in?
Yeah, 50 net.
50 net, yeah. That's, it's a tribute to you to see that. And that can be hard. I mean, you've birthed this baby, right? And you're handing that baby to someone to help take it to 100 million plus. So good for you. It's
been a huge relief.
I bet it has. You can work out again and walk and take care of yourself.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah. Well, and now you can come up and out of it, and probably, I would imagine, bring forward more products, more offerings, other things for
Yeah.
women that you clearly have a gift in identifying and solving for.
Yeah, I think it has really given me time back to start to think creatively about the brand again
Sure.
and be able to work with the team in that way so that the company continues to sparkle. Because, if I look honestly at like our marketing initiatives over the past couple of years, they haven't been that great the past couple of years.
Mm,
Um, and I just haven't had the time
sure.
to focus on them in the way that I needed, right? And so it's like if you grade yourself on areas of your own business that you're in charge of, I probably give myself a C for, like the stuff I was putting out into the world the past few years. And now that I have that time back
Yeah, yeah.
and can focus on it, we're improving it, right? That grade's getting
That's
better.
awesome. That's fantastic. So we end with rapid fire. I'm going to hit you with some quick ones, and you just tell me what comes up. You ready? One thing on your bucket list. Wow. Let's go.
Let's
That's
go.
interesting. The southern, no, I'm not suggesting I want to go with you, Lo, but I mean, I'm sure we'd have fun, but where is that? What's there?
So
Why?
the southern islands of Japan, it's like Okinawa, and they're like the most gorgeous tropical paradise. But Japan, so I
Cool.
just have this fantasy of like eating amazing Japanese food in Okinawa.
Right. How fun.
I want to go to places like less traveled.
Right, 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 right,
That's
right,
on
right.
my
Not so, I love it. I love it. One thing people would be surprised to learn about you.
I'm allergic to mangoes.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. All right, favorite self-care tips. Favorite self-care tips.
Get as much sleep as you possibly can fit into your schedule every single day.
Sleep's huge. If you had to be stuck on an island, I think I know the answer to this, with one of your castmates from Laguna, the hills, who would it be and why?
Lauren, Lauren Conrad. I've known her since the sixth grade. We'd be fine.
Wow. If you had to go into business with one of the castmates, who would it be and why?
Oh, none. I learned that solo founders,
Yeah,
it's a much easier path.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It sounds like you've had some experience with that. That's awesome. If in the last year, what new habit or maybe a new purchase has most improved your life?
I've started doing lymphatic drainage massage at home, and it really helps with inflammation, bloating, and immunity. So I'm on the lymphatic drainage. Like, I don't, it's not a bandwagon. It's, a 1,000-year-old practice. So,
How does
but I'm
that work?
into it.
This is
Basically,
interesting.
your lymph nodes are responsible for
Sure.
moving lymph throughout your body, and it's a big part of your immune system. And
Yep.
so, if you activate your lymph nodes with like gentle massage and then like move the lymph towards the lymph nodes, it basically helps to keep your lymph moving, and you're just healthier as a result. And if you carry extra water weight, if you're bloated from eating, sort of like moving that lymphatic fluid like really helps keep the body moving and going.
And so is that a specialist that does those kinds of massages?
You can go get a massage like
Okay.
in a spa, but they're really expensive. And so it's really easy to do at home. You just learn some of the techniques, and it's really
You do
easy.
it to yourself.
Yeah.
Interesting. Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay, I'm tracking. It took me a minute.
Yeah.
I'm envisioning a guy on top with a lymphatic drainage device next to him draining your lymph nodes is kind of the visual that I had to
Yeah,
escape.
you push the extra lymph fluid towards your lymph nodes and then you pee it out.
Nice. All right, cool. I'm going to Google that. So the
Yeah.
show's called Game Changers. So one last question. Who or what is a game changer who inspires you and why?
I think all of the other female founders that have started businesses in the last 10 years really are a huge inspiration to me. I don't think that I would have been brave enough to start my own company unless others had done it before me and I could follow in their footsteps.
Oh, that's so cool. Who are the top two or three that you would say have really inspired you? I'm just
I
curious.
think Sarah Blakely is definitely one for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kim Kardashian is another great example. Say what
Mm-hmm.
you will about her, think what you will about her. She is a powerhouse. And I think Emily from Glossier is another really great example.
Yes. Do you know Jamie Kern Lima?
No.
Jamie Kern Lima started It Cosmetics.
Oh, yes, I love it. Cosmetics.
Yeah, yeah, she's a neat woman. She came on the show as well. She's pretty incredible too.
Yeah,
So
I don't know her personally, but I am a huge fan of her brand and the story there. It's really
yeah,
incredible.
very inspiring. Well, Lo, this was so fun. Thank you. And people can find out more. Go to lovewellness.com.
Lovewellness.com, at Love Wellness on Instagram, TikTok, all the social channels.
I love it. Lo, this was fun.
Thank you.